The banquet hall lights blazed over 50 seated guests, all colleagues, relatives, and municipal leaders invited to Dong Wenjun's 50th birthday. I'd spent 3 full days coordinating catering, floral displays, and custom photo slideshows to honor the man I'd tended to for 30 years straight. Then he stepped up to the podium, glass of red wine raised, and dropped the announcement that split our entire family open at the seams. I'm filing for early retirement effective next month. I'm hitting the open road, cross-country road trip with my soulmate, to chase poetry and freedom before my years slip away. A murmur rippled across the tables. I stood frozen beside the cake table, fingers white around the cake server I'd polished that morning. Soulmate, everyone in the room who'd spent time around Dong's office knew exactly who that label belonged to. When the online poet he'd been showering with official resources and private gifts for 6 months straight. I didn't stop to think before I shoved the full banquet table forward. Plates, wine glasses, and the 3-tier birthday cake crashed across the marble floor, frosting splattering the tailored suits of his bureau subordinates. Silence crashed over the hall in one sharp wave. Dong Wenjun's face turned crimson with embarrassment. He marched straight to my side, voice sharp enough to cut through the room's hush. What is wrong with you? I've spent 30 years providing for this family, never strayed, never wasted public funds. You owe me a little happiness in my later years. Before I could open my mouth to list every reason his reckless plan would destroy our whole household, Dong Haran stepped between us, his posture rigid with judgment. Mom, Dad's a respected bureau director with intellectual depth. You spend every single day scrubbing floors and folding laundry. You can't possibly understand what he's craving out of life. He's sacrificed so much staying tied to this routine for you. Just let him go. Li Man, for months pregnant with my first grandchild, slipped an arm through Haran's elbow and nodded in full agreement, her tone soft but unyielding. You're being incredibly selfish. Everyone deserves a shot at their dreams, even middle-aged men. What harm is there in him traveling while we prepare for the baby? I scanned the room at every face turned to judge me, and the weight of 30 years of invisible labor crashed down all at once. Every early morning breakfast I cooked, every late night tending to his sick parents, every penny I scrimped to buy him designer suits. None of it registered to a single person here. All of you act like I'm the villain. I said flat, no tears yet, just a hollow, cold disbelief. But none of you have stopped to ask why I'm terrified of him quitting early. I ticked off each life-altering risk one by one, slow and deliberate, so every guest heard every word. He carries hereditary diabetes and chronic high blood lipids. Without consistent, customized meal plans and monthly hospital check-ins I schedule for him, unregulated travel eating will land him in intensive care within months. Early retirement slashes his monthly pension by nearly 40%, funds we rely on to cover Haran and Li Man's apartment costs and upcoming infant medical bills. As long as he holds the director title, Haran's civil service department leaders treat him with deference. Once Dong steps down, all that institutional protection vanishes overnight. And the baby arrives in 6 months. We were supposed to split childcare shifts so they wouldn't burn out. Dong Wenjun scoffed, cutting me off mid-sentence, his tone dripping with condescension. All you care about is chaining me to domestic chores for the rest of my life, wrapped up in fake concern for the kid and Haran's job. This family's been nothing but a suffocating cage for me. Haran backed his father instantly, rolling his eyes like my worries were trivial nonsense. Mom, you're just a housewife with no career income. Dad's the sole breadwinner around here. His wants come first. Stop clinging to the comfort you get from controlling every small household detail. That line landed like a fist to my ribs. 30 years of non-stop labor dismissed as meaningless busy work. I stood there staring at my husband's perfectly pressed tailored shirt, ironed by my hands at 5 a.m. That morning, my son's brand new civil service blazer, purchased with money I'd saved skipping personal clothing for a decade, and the expensive maternity dress Li Man wore, funded from Dong's salary that I rationed meticulously. Every luxury they owned existed only because I stripped every comfort from my own life, and they all thought I had nothing to contribute. The banquet dissolved shortly after the table collapse, all guests filing out with awkward sideways glances at me. Haran dragged Dong Wenjun to his apartment, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the walls of our shared home, leaving me alone in the wreckage of the celebration I'd built for him. I sank onto the leather sofa and let the full weight of 6 months of quiet clues crash into place one after another. The first red flag had popped up half a year prior, when 2 glossy hardcover poetry collections materialized on Dong's office shelf overnight. The author portrait printed on the jacket was one, soft makeup and silk linen blouses framing her delicate features, every line of blurb branding her a wandering literary visionary. I'd once written poetry and local newspaper essays back before marriage. I'd even won a youth writing award in my 20s. Over dinner one evening, I tried to strike up a conversation about her verse, hoping to connect with my husband over a shared old passion. He dropped his chopsticks mid-meal, irritation sharp in his voice. You're just a woman who cleans and cooks. You can't comprehend serious literary art. Don't embarrass us both pretending you understand poetry. He had retreated straight to his home office that night, locking the door to read Wenwan's books for hours without a single word to me for the rest of the evening. Back then, I brushed it off as temporary work stress, unwilling to entertain the idea he'd discard our shared youthful hobbies for strangers' writing. Bit by bit, more pieces fell into alignment as I replayed every small odd moment I'd ignored out of blind wifely loyalty. Dong had leveraged his cultural bureau authority to host a full-scale book signing event for Wenwan, all venue and marketing costs covered by department public activity budgets. He'd approved multiple large creative grants directly deposited into her personal bank account, fast-tracked a dedicated private studio under the regional literary talent recruitment, policy solely for her use. Her social media feeds overflowed soft, coded posts referencing a kindred spirit high-ranking official, paired with photos of the two of them sitting side by side at bureau literary galas. Hundreds of followers flooded their comment threads gushing about their once-in-a-lifetime platonic soul connection. I pulled our wedding album from the entertainment cabinet and flipped through the faded photos of 20-year-old me, camera slung over my shoulder, stacks of handwritten poetry notebooks tucked in my bag before I traded all my creative hobbies for round-the-clock family care. The girl in those photos loved words and beauty just as much as one claimed to, but Dong hadn't spared a single glance at my writing in 30 years, reserving all his admiration for this woman he'd met online less than a year prior. I traced my fingers over the frayed cuffs of my own t-shirt, a hand-me-down men's work shirt Dong had discarded last spring, fabric faded thin from hundreds of wash cycles. My palms were permanently lined with thick cooking calluses, fingers slightly bent from decades of gripping kitchen utensils and scrub brushes. Meanwhile, Dong retained the youthful sharp features I'd fallen for, his hair fully black from salon treatments I scheduled and paid for, skin clear from balanced home-cooked meals I prepared daily. At 50, he looked a full decade younger than me, every bit of his polished public image built entirely on my unseen domestic labor. I'd spent years rationalizing his distant behavior, clinging to the memory of our early marriage and the promise we'd raise our son side by side. But now every piece lined up perfectly. He'd been planning to abandon our entire household long before announcing early retirement, planning to drain our shared finances to fund travel with Wenwan while expecting me to stay behind and continue serving his son, pregnant daughter-in-law, and future grandchild for free. I resolved to attempt one final calm conversation with Dong, clinging to a faint last shred of hope that 30 years of marriage might still carry some weight with him. I grabbed my keys and drove to Howren's residential complex, the villa I'd emptied my parents' entire inheritance to purchase and fully renovate as a wedding gift for my son, signed entirely under my name as my personal premarital dowry asset. I'd intentionally kept the property deed locked in my home safe, never transferring ownership to Howren out of quiet caution, though I'd allowed him and Lee Man full exclusive occupancy post-wedding. When I rounded the garden hedge leading to the backyard, the sound of laughter and birthday music hit me before I even reached the front gate. Through the iron fencing, I watched the scene unfold, and my blood ran cold in my veins. Dong stood center of the yard, a glittering paper birthday crown perched on Wenwan's head, holding a bottle of expensive red wine to pour into her glass. Howren hovered at her elbow passing dessert plates. We carried a double-layer cream cake out from the villa kitchen to set it directly in front of the poet, all three of my blood relatives treating the stranger like the lady of my inherited estate. Then Dong reached into his suit inner pocket, pulled out a delicate antique hairpin encrusted jade and inlaid kingfisher feather filigree, and lifted it to slide into Wenwan's hair. I recognized the artifact instantly. My maternal grandmother's heirloom, handed down to me as my wedding dowry, locked deep inside my home safe for decades because I rarely attended formal events to wear fine jewelry. I'd never once mentioned the safe's combination to Dong, yet he'd broken into my locked storage space to steal my irreplaceable family heirloom for another woman. Wen tilted her head playfully to show off the hairpin to Dong, and he leaned in to press a soft kiss to her temple, oblivious to me standing frozen at the gate. Every ounce of lingering goodwill I'd held onto for 30 years dissolved in that single quiet gesture. I marched to the front door and reached for the smart lock fingerprint pad, only to receive a repeated error prompt each time I pressed my thumb to the scanner. I typed my long-held passcode next, and the machine blared a loud password invalid, alert over and over. It hit me in that moment. Howren and Lee Man had completely wiped my biometric data and reset the lock combination behind my back, banning me from entering the property I'd fully funded and legally owned. I slammed my palm against the metal door frame, raising my voice loud enough to cut through the backyard chatter. Open the store right now. This villa belongs to my parents' inheritance. It's my legal property, not yours to house strangers in. Howren sprinted across the lawn to yank the front door partially open, planting his body firmly in the threshold to block my entry, hands raised to push my shoulders backward hard enough to stagger me a full step onto the pavement. Mom, don't make a scene in front of our guest. Go home and cool off for a few hours. We'll talk later when you're not upset. I ducked under his outstretched arm and burst past him into the backyard, straight for Wenwan where the antique hairpin still glinted in her dark hair. Before anyone could react, I snatched the pin clean from her scalp, gripping it tight in my palm as I spun to face Dong directly. Wenwan let out a shrill, startled cry and collapsed against Dong's chest, feigning terror as he wrapped his arms around her shoulders to shield her from me, rage blazing across his face. Have you lost your mind? Take your anger out on me if you need to. Don't lash out at an innocent woman. A bitter laugh bubbled out of my throat, sharp and unsteady. I haven't gotten around to striking you yet, but don't worry. That's coming next. My palm connected hard against his cheek with a sharp crack that echoed across the quiet garden. The red imprint of my fingers bloomed instantly on his pale skin. Howren lunged forward to seize my wrist and hurl me backward onto the stone patio. The antique hairpin slipped out of my grip and clattered against the tile, jade inlays and delicate filigree shattering into dozens of broken fragments. I dropped to my knees to gather the cracked pieces, chest tight with rage and grief for a piece of my maternal lineage he'd stolen and destroyed to impress his paramour. Dong stared down at the broken jewelry, then shifted all blame onto me without a flicker of remorse. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't charged over here, attacking people unprovoked. Wenwan pulled herself free of Dong's arms, straightening her silk blouse before delivering a patronizing speech directed straight at me, her tone coded in fake, gentle sympathy. Sister Zhou, I hate to speak plainly, but as Dong's close literary confidant, I feel obligated to point this out. You're his wife in name only, yet you never maintain a polished appearance or own fine accessories to accompany him to official events. Colleagues whisper that director Dong can't even afford to dress his spouse properly, and it damages his professional reputation. That pin satin used in your storage anyway, letting me wear it to my book launch was only reasonable. Lee Man stepped to Wenwan's side, looping her arm through the poet's elbow in open solidarity, Howren nodding vigorously beside them. Mom, she's completely right. You look frumpy every time you step outside the house. You never carry nice bags or jewelry. You're an embarrassment to Dad's position. It's no wonder he never brings you to bureau banquets. Wimon carries natural literary grace that matches his status. Wimon added a saccharine soft remark designed to twist the knife deeper. She's skilled at domestic labor. That's valuable in its own way, I suppose, just not suited to stand beside a man of artistic and administrative standing. Howren snorted in agreement, loud enough for everyone to hear. No one would blame Dad for craving better company than a live-in mate he stuck with for 30 years. The three of them stood shoulder to shoulder against me, united in dismissing my 30 years of sacrifice as trivial housework while glorifying a woman who leached Dong's funds and stole my family heirlooms. Something snapped fully inside me at that moment. I didn't yell or cry. I simply pivoted and swept the full banquet dining table loaded with steak platters and the birthday cake onto the stone ground, cream and cutlery scattering across the tiles. Dong reared his hand back to strike me, eyes blazing with fury, but I didn't flinch an inch, walking eyes with him steady and cold. Raise that hand and touch me, and every single financial record of your public fund misuse for Winwon's events, every transfer receipt you sent her with our marital savings, every detail of this stolen heirloom lands on every desk at the Municipal Discipline Inspection Commission by tomorrow sunrise. I've kept every bank slip and bureau expense receipt for 3 years straight. I have nothing left to lose. His arm froze midair, shock flickering across his face at my unshakable threat. Howren stepped forward, voice tight with panic, his self-preservation instinct kicking in hard. Think of my career, Mom. If Dad's disciplinary scandal blows up, both me and my wife will be blacklisted for promotions forever. I glanced between my son, my husband, and the poet they'd all chosen over me, and laid out my non-negotiable terms flat and unyielding. I'll agree to sign divorce paperwork to set you free to travel with her, but I demand an equitable split of all 30 years of marital joint assets, including half of Dong's pension and accumulated bureau benefits. This villa, my full premarital dowry, will be reclaimed immediately. You two have 48 hours to pack all your belongings and vacate the premises, or I file a property trespass lawsuit and post notice outside your workplace buildings. Howren's face drained of color, instantly switching from judgment to desperate pleading. This house was meant to be our permanent family home for the baby. You can't take it back now. Li Man's tone turned sharp and bitter, hand resting over her pregnant belly as she hurled threats my way. You're abandoning your own grandchild by evicting us. You will regret living alone with no one to care for you in old age. I gave her a thin, empty smile, already mentally compiling all the asset evidence and disciplinary paperwork I'd stored over years of quiet observation. If you're all so enamored with Winwon's gentle wisdom and poetic spirit, she's welcome to play the maternal grandmother role for your newborn instead of me. Enjoy the luxury lifestyle you've all chosen at my expense once I remove my financial support entirely. I turned and walked out of the villa without glancing back, leaving 4 people stunned and seething in the wreckage of Winwon's stolen birthday celebration. Every piece of proof I'd quietly collected over months sat locked in my home safe. Bank transfer logs, bureau expense receipts, photos of the stolen heirloom, witness statements from bureau staff who'd watched Dong funnel public resources to Winwon. The reckoning for their coordinated exploitation of my labor, my property, and my life was only just beginning. I left the wrecked villa backyard without a single backward glance, drove straight back to our marital house, and unlocked the wall-mounted safe bolted to the bedroom closet. For 30 years, I'd stored every critical document inside this metal box. My parents' inheritance deed for the villa, all my personal dowry gold, every bank receipt for household spending, every slip proving Dong Wenjun funneled bureau activity budgets to Winwon's events, and screenshots of their late-night private chat logs. I spread the stack of paperwork across the bed, sorting them into 3 labeled folders: premarital personal assets, marital shared finances, public fund misuse evidence. Each stack was thick enough to bend manila folders, proof I'd quietly documented every irregular financial move Dong made over the past 6 months, long before the birthday banquet blow-up. I'd never planned to weaponize these files until my own family turned against me to favor a stranger. I pulled out my phone and typed a concise formal notice, sent simultaneously to Dong Wenjun and Dong Howren via text and WeChat, timestamped for legal record. All my premarital property, including the full villa, must be vacated within 48 hours. Any belongings left behind will be disposed of at my sole discretion. All marital joint assets require legal equal division, including Dong's accumulated pension, bureau provident fund, savings accounts, and vehicles. I demand a voluntary asset transfer agreement signed and delivered before close of business the next day, or I submit all public fund misuse evidence to the Municipal Disciplinary Commission. Effective immediately, I will no longer provide any financial or domestic support to Dong, Howren, Li Man, or their unborn child. No free childcare, no subsidized living expenses, no unpaid caretaking for anyone in this family. Less than 10 minutes after hitting send, my phone blew up with incoming calls. First was Dong Wenjun, his voice tight and strained the second I picked up. Ming Fong, can we talk this through calmly? There's no need to drag disciplinary officials into our private marital disputes over a trip I'm planning with a friend. Friend, I repeated flat, thumb brushing the photo of him kissing Winwon's temple saved in my evidence folder. You break into my safe, steal my ancestral dowry hairpin, funnel bureau public money to fund her studio and book signings, then parade her in my inherited villa while locking me out of my own property. That's not a platonic friend bond, Dong. He shifted tactics instantly, switching from irritation to manufactured soft sorrow, a trick he'd used for decades to make me cave to his demands. I admit I took the hairpin without asking. That was thoughtless, but it's just a trinket. The trip is my only chance to live freely after 30 years of stifling domestic routine. If we split assets half and half, I won't have enough money for the RV and travel expenses. I cut him off before he could spin more self-pitying excuses. Your travel fantasy is not my financial responsibility. For 30 years, I skipped every new outfit, every skincare set, every personal vacation to save money for your suits, medical care, and Haran's education. I am not draining my own life savings to fund your romantic road trip with another woman. He fell silent for 2 full seconds, then his tone turned sharp with thinly veiled threat. You wouldn't really submit those bureau expense slips to the commission, would you? My entire career would collapse, and Haran's unit will punish him by association. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. 30 years you let me shoulder every hardship without a single ounce of gratitude. When you and my own son choose a stranger over me, I lose every reason to protect your career reputation. Get the asset agreement drafted by tomorrow evening, or the full evidence packet lands on disciplined desks at 8 a.m. I hung up mid-sputter, ignoring his repeated callback attempts, and set my phone to mute for 30 minutes to sort through my dowry gold receipts. Every gram of gold my parents gifted me at marriage sat untouched in the safe, preserved for my future grandchild, until I realized Lee Man and Haran would only view it as free handouts to squander, without appreciation. 30 minutes of muted calls passed before Dong Haran's name popped up on my screen, his call far more frantic and unhinged than his father's. He didn't bother with gentle persuasion, launching straight into accusations the second I answered. Mom, how can you do this to me and my pregnant wife? That villa was supposed to be our permanent home to raise the baby. If you evict us with only 2 days to move, we have nowhere to live, and Lee Man's prenatal checkups will be disrupted. Nowhere to live. I echoed, pulling up his salary deposit records I'd copied from joint bank logs years prior. You draw a steady civil service salary every month. Your wife works full-time as a hospital nurse. The only reason you can't afford separate housing is you've grown accustomed to living rent-free off my inherited property for 2 years, with all daily expenses quietly covered by Dong's salary that I rationed down to the bone. Haran stumbled over his words. Caught off guard, I knew exact details of their household finances. That's different. That's position guarantees stable income, and you have no personal salary to worry about housing costs anyway. You're just being petty over a fight at the birthday party. Petty. I listed every injury they'd inflicted on me one by one, slow and unshaken. You locked me out of my own villa. You stood by and watched your father steal and destroy my ancestral jewelry. You publicly called me a useless housewife in front of 50 banquet guests while you sided with a woman draining your dad's public funds. You and your wife celebrated her birthday inside my property as if I didn't exist. None of this is petty. It's deliberate exploitation of everything I spent my life building. Lee Man's voice cut through the line in the background, loud enough I could hear every sharp word. Tell her if she evicts us, we won't let her near the baby once it's born. No grandma gets to see the child who stripped our home away. I responded directly to her without raising my voice. You spent hours praising Wenwan's taste and calling me frumpy and embarrassing in front of everyone yesterday. You chose her over your mother-in-law voluntarily. If you'd rather let a stranger play maternal figure for your kid than accept the consequences of your own choices, that's entirely your decision. Haran's tone softened into fake remorse, a transparent ploy to manipulate my maternal instinct. I know we were harsh yesterday, Mom. We just didn't realize how much this hurt you. Give us more time to move and drop the asset split demand. We'll make it up to you once the baby arrives. I saw straight through his act. His only regret was losing free housing and financial support, not the cruel words he'd spoken to me. This was the second major shift I'd witnessed in his character over 2 days. Yesterday, he stood firm alongside his father to dismiss my suffering. Today, he begs mercy only when his own comfortable lifestyle is at risk. This exposed his core flaw. His loyalty only extends to people who can provide him material benefits. I ended the call, without promising any leniency, and less than an hour later, a new unknown number dialed my phone. It was Wenwan herself, her soft, poetic tone gone, replaced with sharp, anxious greed. Sister Zhou, I understand you're upset about the hairpin incident, but Dong and I have planned a year-long cross-country RV trip. If you split his assets equally, we won't have enough budget for the RV and creative travel supplies I need for my new manuscript. Could you reconsider and waive half the pension claim? I didn't bother masking my sarcasm. So, your writing inspiration and vacation plans take priority over 30 years of my marital labor? You accepted tens of thousands in bureau grant money Dong illegally pushed through for you, wore my family heirloom jewelry without a second thought, and now you beg me to surrender my legal share of assets so you can travel in luxury? Her mask crumbled instantly, all gentle literary charm vanishing into bitter resentment. You're holding Dong hostage with legal threats just because you can't compete with my artistic temperament. He is miserable stuck with a housewife who has no taste for poetry or travel. It's only fair he gets funds to pursue happiness. I hung up on her mid-rant, realizing a key truth I'd missed before. Wenwan never loved Dong, only the money and status his official title granted her access to. The soulmate narrative was a carefully constructed performance to extract resources. The second funds are threatened, she drops all pretense of kindness. This is the first major plot twist. Her gentle poet persona was entirely performative, financial manipulation. By the following afternoon, a courier knocked at my front door, delivering a sealed envelope Dong Wenjun sent over. Inside was a typed voluntary asset transfer agreement he drafted without consulting a lawyer, full of sneaky loopholes designed to shortchange me of my legal share. I spread the papers across the table and marked every deceptive clause one by one with a red pen. He listed the villa as joint marital property, deliberately omitting the premarital inheritance deed I held as legal sole owner, attempting to force a 50-50th split of my personal dowry asset instead of full reclamation. He only agreed to split liquid savings, fully excluding his provident fund, decades of pension accumulation, and official performance bonuses, his largest long-term assets. The contract included an unwritten verbal clause he scribbled at the bottom. After asset division, I must remain living in the marital home, continue cooking his meals, and provide care if he returns injured or ill from travel. All bureau expense receipts and public fund transfers to Winwan were to be erased from consideration, with a line stating I would destroy all evidence upon signing. I sat staring at the document, processing the depths of his self-serving deception. Even when forced to concede to asset division, he still planned to lock me into permanent unpaid domestic labor, keep his largest retirement assets for himself, and steal half-legal ownership of the villa my parents left me. His core motive was crystal clear now. He views me as a permanent domestic caretaker asset he can't afford to lose, even after divorcing and traveling with another woman. I snapped photos of every deceptive clause for legal backup, then typed a formal reply document listing required revisions before I would sign any paperwork, send it back via courier within an hour with a strict deadline of noon the next day. If he refused to rewrite the contract to reflect legal asset ownership and full equal division of all retirement funds, the disciplinary evidence packet would be submitted without delay. An hour after the courier departed, Dong Wenjun rushed over to my front door unannounced, pounding the door frame repeatedly until I unlocked it. He carried a pleading, defeated expression, trying to push past me into the house before I blocked the threshold. Can we negotiate without formal legal paperwork? The clauses I wrote were just a rough draft. I didn't mean to cut you out of anything meaningful. Rough draft. I held up the red-marked agreement pages to his face. You tried to claim my inherited villa as shared property, hide your pension funds, and demand I remain your free live-in nurse for the rest of your life after divorce. That isn't a rough draft. It's a deliberate attempt to legally swindle me out of 30 years of shared assets and my personal dowry. His facade of remorse fell away, irritation bubbling to the surface. I just don't see why you need half my pension. I'm 50 years old. I need that money to survive out on the road. 30 years I survived on scraps while you wore designer clothes and ate restaurant meals on bureau expense accounts. I'm entitled to half every asset accumulated during our marriage under local marriage law, no exceptions. We argued back and forth for 20 minutes, him alternating between begging and subtle threats about Haren's future, before he finally stormed out of my house, promising to rewrite the agreement overnight. That night, Haren texted me a long, tearful paragraph claiming Lee Man was suffering severe prenatal stress worrying about housing, begging me to extend the move-out deadline by a full week. I pulled up photos of the double-layer birthday cake and expensive wine they'd served when one inside my villa just 2 days prior, sent them back to him with a single-line reply, "You had money for luxury birthday feasts for a stranger, but no backup housing plan for yourselves after exploiting my property for 2 years. No deadline extension will be granted." The next morning at 10 a.m., the revised asset agreement arrived by courier once more. This version eliminated the illegal villa joint ownership claim and fully listed his pension and provident funds for equal division, but a small new hidden loop remained buried in the fine print. Dong required a verbal private agreement that after signing divorce papers, I would never contact Winwan or pursue legal action against her for the stolen jewelry and misappropriated bureau funds. I picked up my phone and called a trusted family lawyer I'd consulted the day prior, forwarding the full revised contract for professional review. The lawyer confirmed the clause attempting to block legal pursuit of Winwan's damages claim was unenforceable in court, but advised me to cross it out and initial every amended line before signing any documents to avoid future disputes. I printed a copy of the full 30 years of marital asset breakdown, attached all villa inheritance legal deeds and bureau misuse evidence as addendums to the contract, and sent a final notice to Dong. Come sign the fully revised, loophole-free agreement at my residence by 3 p.m. Or disciplinary materials are filed before the workday ends. 2 hours later, Dong Wenjun arrived alone. No Winwan or Haren accompanying him this time. His shoulders sagged, defeated, as he scanned every crossed-out, unfair clause I'd marked on the paper. He hesitated with the pen hovering over the signature line for 5 full minutes before finally putting his name to the document, handing over a bank transfer receipt for one. 2 million yuan in marital asset compensation that hit my account instantly upon verification. As he turned to leave my living room, he made one last desperate plea, clinging to the same delusional fantasy he'd held all along. Once the trip with Winwan is over, I can come back here. We can go back to how things used to be. You take care of the house and grandbaby, and I'll settle down permanently. I shook my head without a shred of hesitation, sliding the fully executed divorce draft across the table toward him. There is no going back. For 30 years, I gave up every dream, every personal possession, and every moment of peace to serve your family. Now I reclaim my assets, my freedom, and the life I abandoned to marry you. You and Winwan are free to travel without relying on my labor or property ever again. He stared at the signed asset papers in his hand, speechless, and dragged his feet out the front door without another word. Minutes after he left, my banking app pinged with a deposit alert, the full one. 2 million compensation had cleared into my personal account, legally mine with no future claims Dong could file against it. I immediately contacted a chain homestay management brand, sent over full legal ownership paperwork for the villa to negotiate a 5-year long-term rental contract, planning to move out of the old marital house and leave all the memories of 30 years of one-sided sacrifice behind me for good. The funds from the asset split and upcoming villa rental income would finally let me chase the writing and creative hobbies I'd abandoned decades earlier, the same passions Dong had mocked me for pursuing all those years. A notification popped up on my social media account, a local rural tourism blogger reaching out to invite me to visit their mountain village and share my old poetry, writing work with their audience. I typed a quick reply confirming I'd travel north within the week, a quiet new chapter unfolding for me entirely separate from Dong, Haren, and Wen's toxic orbit, while the three of them faced an uncertain future stripped of my financial safety net. The day after Dong signed the asset agreement and transferred 1.2 million into my account, I finalized a 5-year homestay lease for my dowry villa. The management company wired the first year's rent up front, and I sent Howard a formal eviction notice via registered mail, attaching the full property deed proving sole ownership. I didn't pick up any of their frantic calls for the next 3 days, packing a small suitcase of my personal belongings. Only my jewelry, writing notebooks, and a few sets of brand new clothes I'd bought with my settlement money, none of the faded hand-me-down tees I'd worn for decades. I booked a one-way train ticket to a quiet northeastern mountain village the local blogger had messaged me about. Before departing, I emptied the marital home's closet of all my things, leaving Dong's rows of tailored suits and expensive luggage untouched. 30 years I'd polished, washed, and maintained every piece of his wardrobe. Now I didn't spare a single glance at his possessions. On my way out the door, I tossed the broken fragments of my ancestral jade hairpin into the trash bin. No need to hold onto relics tied to betrayal. Within 48 hours of my arrival in the village, I fell into a gentle new rhythm. I hiked the surrounding hills to pick wild mushrooms and wild vegetables, filmed short casual daily clips for a small social media account I started, and stayed up late drafting poetry and prose again, just like I had in my 20s before marriage. Without endless laundry, cooking, hospital runs for in-laws, and catering to Dong's ego, words flowed effortlessly out of me. My writing carried 30 years of quiet life experience, a depth of shallow internet poetry of when one could never match. Viewers flooded my page within weeks, calling me Village Poet Auntie. A regional publishing house reached out with a formal book offer for my collected essays and verse, offering a generous copyright advance large enough to purchase a small private courtyard in the village outright. I signed the contract without hesitation, put a down payment on the yard, and began minor renovations to plant flower beds and set up a writing desk overlooking the mountains. Months passed without a single message from my old family until one evening my phone buzzed with a frantic incoming call from Howard. I answered only out of mild curiosity, ready to hang up the second he launched into pleas for money or housing. "Mom, you have to come back right now. Dad's in critical condition in the hospital." His voice cracked with panic. No trace of the arrogant young man who'd called me a useless made half a year prior. I kept my tone calm, no rush or sympathy. I'm divorced from Dong Wenjun. His medical care is not my responsibility anymore. Contact Wenwan. She's the companion he chose to travel with. Haren's tone turned bitter and desperate, spilling every disaster they'd stumbled into since I cut all support. After eviction, he and Lee Man had been forced to rent a cramped small apartment with sky-high monthly rent. Without Dong's director privileges, we couldn't secure a premium maternity ward, and their planned luxury Idzer center was unaffordable on their combined civil service wages. Dong had taken his early retirement payout, bought a fancy RV for Wenwan, and the pair spent recklessly on restaurants, designer goods, and cross-country travel for barely 3 months. All the pension savings were drained completely. Worse, without my daily balanced meals and regular blood pressure, blood sugar monitoring, Dong ignored his doctor's orders to indulge Wenwan's love of late-night barbecue and alcohol. One night camping in the wilderness to watch meteor showers, he suffered a severe hypertensive stroke and collapsed unconscious. When Wenwan dialed emergency services, hospital staff told her she had no legal spousal guardianship rights to sign emergency surgery consent papers. They could only reach Haren. By the time Haren rushed to the remote campsite hospital, the window for optimal treatment had closed. Dong survived, but was left half-paralyzed, slurring speech, unable to dress or feed himself independently, stuck with lifelong incontinence. Wenwan only stayed at the hospital for 3 days before leaving a short note and driving the RV away, vanishing without a trace, abandoning Dong to his son's care. Haren's rambling call spilled every ugly detail of their cascading misfortunes one after another. After Wenwan fled, he tried to hire full-time care for Dong, only to discover Dong's bank accounts were empty, and he'd racked up over 200,000 yuan in travel credit card debt alongside the drained pension fund. There was no money for round-the-clock nurses, so Haren and his heavily pregnant wife were forced to split hospital shifts after work every single day. Lee Man's mood crumbled under the unending stress of hospital visits, expensive rent, and no financial buffer. The couple fought non-stop every night, their marriage hanging by a thread. Desperate for compensation to cover medical and debt costs, Haren published long online posts exposing Wenwan's manipulation of Dong's official power, posting screenshots of large bureau grants and expensive gifts Dong had gifted her over the years. The viral online backlash against Wenwan exploded instantly. Netizens dug up records of her events funded by Cultural Bureau public funds, and local disciplinary authorities launched a formal investigation into Dong's tenure as director. Investigators uncovered years of improper allocation of literary activity budgets exclusively for Wenwan's benefit, enough to trigger a disciplinary penalty even with Dong partially incapacitated. Her social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments labeling her a gold-digging homewrecker. Publishers canceled her upcoming book contract, her studio lost all government sponsorship, and every brand collaboration cut ties with her overnight. Penniless and infamous, she went completely offline, dodging all court summons Haren filed to recover the stolen funds and jewelry. Dong's disciplinary case dragged on through his rehabilitation period. Investigators confirmed repeated misuse of public funds for personal romantic favors, resulting in a formal disciplinary record permanently attached to his personnel file. Haren's civil service unit reallocated him to the lowest tier, most labor-intensive department as collateral damage from his father's scandal. All future promotions were permanently blocked for him and Lee Man. The dream of stable, easy bureaucratic advancement Dong had promised his son vanished forever. Once Dong's rehabilitation progress stalled due to lack of consistent professional care, Haren had no choice but to move him to a low-budget public nursing home on the outskirts of the city, unable to afford private care facilities. Within 2 months of admission, Dong passed away from secondary complications brought on by his untreated chronic conditions and stroke damage. After Dawn's funeral, Lee Man gave birth to their son, but their marital strife only worsened without any of my past financial help to ease their burden. Constant arguments over rent, medical debt, childcare costs, and the burden of Dong's lingering debts drove them to file for divorce just months after the baby was born. Months later, Haran tracked down my village courtyard, showing up unannounced with the infant in a stroller, hoping to beg me to move back to the city to care for his child and wipe out their accumulated debts with my book royalties and villa rental income. He laid out all his regrets, repeating how terribly he'd mistreated me at the birthday banquet and villa birthday party, claiming he now understood how valuable my decades of labor had been. "You can move back into the city house. Keep the grandbaby with you every day," he pleaded, eyes red with exhaustion. "My wife and I can help manage your social media and publishing work full-time. We'll take care of all household chores so you only need to write poetry. We'll respect you properly this time, never dismiss you like we did before." I stared at him calmly, no flicker of pity in my expression, and delivered the cold truth he'd spent months avoiding. "Back then you called me a useless housewife and locked me out of my own villa for a stranger. You celebrated Wenwan's birthday with my ancestral jewelry, while your father drained our shared finances to fund her lifestyle. All your regret comes from losing my money and free labor, not from remorse over how you hurt me." Haran's face paled, trying to argue that family blood should override every past wrong, offering to let me live with them and raise the baby as compensation for all the years I sacrificed for their family. I shook my head, gesturing to my quiet courtyard lined with flowers, my writing desk by the window, and the stacks of published poetry collections stacked on the shelf beside me. "I spent 30 years devoting every waking hour to your father and you, sacrificing all my own hobbies, dreams, and comfort just to keep your lives easy. I don't know you, your baby, or your ex-wife a single day of unpaid labor, or a single cent of my earnings. I finally got my own life back, and I'm never giving it up to play free nanny again." I called the village security patrol to escort Haran off my property after he continued lingering and begging, making it clear he was no longer welcome at my courtyard or in my life. After he left, I blocked his phone number and all his social media accounts, severing the last thin thread connecting me to the toxic family that had exploited me for 30 years. Word filtered back to me occasionally through village friends who followed city news updates, when one remained in hiding, unable to secure any literary work or stable income, still dodging civil court summons for the funds Dong gifted her. Haran worked grueling overtime shifts to pay off his father's credit card debt and child support after the divorce, barely able to afford basic groceries for his infant son, stuck in a dead-end civil service position with zero room for advancement. Lee Man took a night shift hospital job to make extra cash. The pair split custody of the baby and fought monthly over limited living space and funds. Every comfort they'd once taken for granted, my villa, my financial subsidies, my round-the-clock domestic labor, was gone permanently. The consequences of their own selfish choices fully settled upon them. None of their suffering fell to me to fix, and I felt no urge to interfere or send any money to ease their hardship. They'd chosen to discard me when I gave everything I had to support them. Now they bore the full weight of their own poor decisions, exactly as they deserved. In contrast, my life in the mountain village flourished year after year. My poetry and essay collection sold over 300,000 copies nationwide, drawing crowds of readers to my small courtyard every weekend. Local township officials invited me to serve as the official tourism ambassador for the mountain region, paying a steady annual stipend alongside my book royalties and villa rental income. I had more than enough savings to live comfortably without ever worrying about scrimping for others again. I renovated my small courtyard to adopt 2 dogs and 4 cats, kept a chicken coop and vegetable garden out back, and spent my days hiking, writing, filming casual rural vlogs, and chatting with visiting readers who'd become like a chosen second family to me, people who admired my words and respected me as an individual, not just a disposable maid or bank account. I'd reclaimed the artistic, passionate young woman I'd been before marriage, the girl who loved poetry and photography that Dawn had spent 30 years mocking and suppressing to keep me tied to domestic drudgery. Occasionally, I'd sit at my window desk at dusk, flipping through my published poetry volumes, thinking back to the 50-year-old birthday banquet where Dong announced his plan to abandon me for a stranger, to the villa backyard where my own son blocked my entry while they paraded my stolen heirloom jewelry on another woman's head, to the decades of faded shirts and blistered cooking palms I'd endured without a word of gratitude. None of those old wounds stung anymore. They'd faded completely, replaced by quiet peace and unshakable self-respect. I'd learned a simple, irreversible truth over the course of all that heartbreak. Poetry and freedom don't require running away from family and abandoning the person who built your entire stable life for you. True beauty and a fulfilling life don't lie in reckless cross-country trips funded by stolen marital assets and public office money. Real peace comes from honoring yourself, refusing to sacrifice your own dreams for people who will never appreciate your endless devotion. I'd wasted 30 years pouring every part of myself into a husband and son who saw only my labor, never me. Now the rest of my life belonged solely to my writing, my quiet mountain home, and the gentle joy I created for myself each passing day. No more unpaid domestic labor. No more hiding my own dreams to cater to other people's vanity. No more sacrificing my assets and self-worth for ungrateful blood relatives. The cycle of exploitation was fully broken. They'd lost everything they'd taken from me, and I'd gained every single piece of myself I'd given up decades prior. This was the true happy ending I'd always deserved, free from the family that once saw me as nothing more than a disposable tool for their comfortable lives.